All right, so let's look at some of the graphical options we have using the GUI here in SQL Server Management Studio to create our tables. So if I come up to the tables folder, I can right click, I can say new table, and I can start specifying columns. And we will make this, let's do the same example. I cleaned up the tables we had made in the last videos. So I'm going to create the same table. I'm going to have person ID. Its data type, we're going to make it an int. I can scroll down through here. If I press I, it will take me down to the I's, and I can pick int pretty quick. Okay. Do I want to allow nulls? No, I don't want to allow nulls for that, because eventually it's going to be the primary key, although I'm not showing you that right now. We'll learn about that in a little bit. And I can just start typing my column names, one per line. Give each of them, we said nvarchar, we'll do 50. I don't want that to be nullable, meaning I want people, they put a column, if they put a row in my database, I want them to make sure they have first name and last name and person ID there. And this is going to be, and you can see if I type NV, I get nvarchar 50, I'll take that. Okay. Then we did age, tiny int is fine, and I'm going to allow that one to be null. So you don't have to put it in an age for somebody if you don't want to. Now, there's no execute button. Okay, so this is one of those things in SQL Server Management Studio that kind of throws people. Like, okay, there's no run button. I don't see a save button. Actually, technically, there is a save button here. We can hit Control S, but if we just hit the X, it comes up and says, hey, do we want to save the changes to this? And we say yes, and it says enter a name for the table. And so I'll call it example like we did before. All right, you would have got the same thing if you would have hit the save button up here. So there's no run, even though it's running commands behind the scenes. Go into table, hit refresh, and there's our example table with our columns. And you can see those are all not null. Tiny int is null, or age is null. Everything worked as we expected it to. All right, so what about changing a table? Let's right click on it, and we're going to pick design. And when we pick design, it comes up here and gives us basically the same thing. If I want to add something, I want to change in name. I want to do something though. I want to move age up. Okay. Yes. And it tells me that saving changes is not permitted. The changes you have made require the table to be dropped and recreated. You have either made changes to a table that can't be recreated or enabled the option prevent saving changes that require the table to be recreated. So this is an important thing we need to talk about tables. The column order does not matter. Our select statement puts the columns in the order that we want them to appear in our queries. It doesn't matter if age is first, last, first name comes before last name comes before first name. It really does not matter. However, sometimes people want to change the column order. If my table was created over a period of time and I added columns and it just makes sense organizationally to put one up by the others, we can do that. However, some of those things require us to actually delete the current table and make the new table with the columns in the correct order. Okay. And to do that, we have to lock and copy all the data that's in that. And if it's in a production environment, that could stop everybody from being able to use the database. It could take a long time to create, to copy all that data, delete the current table, recreate the new table with the columns in the right order. It's really not worth it, especially because column order does not really matter. But if you're in the development environment, you may want to do this. You may want to do it. You don't want to do it on a production server. Okay. So this option, prevent saving changes that require the table to be created, it's on by default. the server does not want to let you do this because of the potential for catastrophe. I'm going to hit cancel. And let's go up and I'll show you where that option is. Tools, options, and then you go down to designers. Tools, options, design. Then we need to go to the table and database designer, and here it is. Prevent saving changes that require table recreation. So it will do it for you. It will recreate the table. Excuse me. It will copy the data. It just will completely take your server offline, or at least that table offline while it does it, because it has to delete it. So I'm going to uncheck it. We'll go back over here. We'll go back to design. Let's move our age up again. I'm going to grab it. It's a little arrow. I'm going to move it up here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And no error. Everything worked fine. If I go over here, right click, and refresh, you can see my column is now moved up. But to do it, it had to destroy this table and recreate it behind the scenes. So watch out for that. Editing a table is really easy. Right click, design, do what you need to do. Remember, it's going to keep you from changing things that could cause data loss. It's still working with SQL behind the scenes. Let's do dropping a table. I have been showing you how to right click and delete tables. So I've been showing you how to do that graphically this whole time. And there's a confusion that happens in this. How do I get rid of this example table using commands? So when I right click the example table, I have a delete option. But delete isn't how you delete a table. And you watch out for this because it will be on certification tests. They'll say, what is the command to drop the example table? And they will give you 4 choices. And the first one will be something like this. Delete table example. And human nature, yes, I want to delete that table. Delete table, that's the command, right? Notice I'm getting incorrect syntax. It doesn't work. So watch out for that on those certification tests. I've seen that one on not just Microsoft's. I've seen it on Oracle tests. I've seen it on the state web exams that we have to take at the end of our school year. The command for deleting a table is drop. Okay, so drop table example. So when you want to delete a table, you actually use the command drop table. And I went ahead and did that. And if I come over here and right click on my tables and refresh, you see that it's gone. So I want you to notice one other thing. I ran that table. It didn't say, are you sure? It didn't say, here's an undo button. What's the undo button do? It undoes the changes in my commands. It doesn't undo dropping the table. There is no undo. The table is gone. All the data that it contained is gone. Drop table is a very, very dangerous command. On a production database, you probably wouldn't want to do that. You would probably want to set the table inactive. We'll talk about other ways to do that at some point in the future. But rather than losing all the data and everything that's in it, set it to inactive, make it so people can't use it in case there's a problem, and then you can turn it back on if there is. All right. So dropping a table isn't really the best thing to do until you're absolutely positive that it's not going to affect anybody. The other thing to know about dropping a table, it's not just the data that's gone. We're going to be talking about indexes and triggers. We're going to be talking about primary key constraints and foreign key constraints and user constraints. When you drop the table, all those things are gone too. Any permissions you have set for that table, when we talk about granting and revoking permissions later on, all those things are going to be gone. So it's not even just a matter of recreating the table and its data. It's all those other database objects that are affected by it. Views and stored procedures do not get affected by it, although they won't work without the table if they were using it. And we'll talk about views, stored procedures, indexes, triggers, constraints. Those are all coming up in a future lesson. And one other thing before I end this video. I've already deleted that table, so I can't use it. So I'm just going to pick a table. I'm going to go over here and right click. And I'm going to come down here. I want to say view dependencies. Okay, so view dependencies. And what does that show? Objects that depend on, so I'm looking at the person.address table. Objects that depend on address. Okay, and we can see that there's some other tables that depend on this table. There's other objects which use this table. So it's always a good idea to check to see if there's dependencies before you delete a table, because the fact that there is something in this window means that these things will quit working. And these are actually views. We'll talk about views later. These are views that get their data from this table. Okay? And if I delete this table, those views will no longer work. Okay, so they are dependent on this table. We can also see that the address table relies on that state and province table. So if I'm going to delete the address, I might want to delete the state and province too. So before you drop a table, check its dependencies. That's always a good practice.